Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation to come along this afternoon and speak to you about the fun and exciting topic that is tax. Thanks. I know I'm conscious of the fact that I'm between your lunch now. I'm standing in the way of it. So I suppose in light of that, I want to make sure that tax does matter and that I deliver on a promise that I'm going to make to you at the very outset, that what we want to try and do over the next wee while is to try and shed a little bit of light on what is sometimes considered to be a little bit of a black art. So tax does matter for a number of reasons, and I suppose if you were to ask most people in the room, you know, what is the difference between a taxidermist and a tax inspector? Well, there's your answer. The taxidermist, according to Mark Twain, leaves the skin behind after him. The taxman, and certainly the Minister for Finance this year, has left very little behind after him. So what I would ask you to just do is maybe have a look at the outline of the presentation, which is going to be very, very simple and straightforward. There's not going to be any great rocket science to it, but I do want to provoke you, and I do want to get you to think about certain things, and maybe even certain preconceptions that you have about the tax system, about how it operates. We'll have a look at the main allowances and credits as they apply at the moment, and the recent tax changes announced in the budget, the emergency budget that we had a couple of weeks ago. We'll have a look at the income levy. We've had an enormous amount of coverage in the press and media about this levy, and a lot of misinformation about it, I have to say as well. So I'm going to spend a few moments just covering that and some of the issues related to it. And finally then we'll wrap up, if I may, and if we have the time, Chairman, to have a questions and answers session at the very end then. The subject of tax, I suppose, provokes one question from most people. Will it be difficult to understand? Will I need to get a calculator out? Will I need to, have a lot of preparation done? No. In relation to any tax matter, it actually is very simple and straightforward. It won't be along the lines of what Mr. Einstein thought. He reckoned that tax was very hard to understand. He reckoned, in fact, it was the hardest thing in the world to understand because he's a mathematician and not a philosopher. Well, you don't need to be either today. You don't need to be a mathematician or a philosopher to understand what we're going to be covering today, because we're going to stick to facts. And I think I just mentioned there a moment ago just about some of the misinformation and the speculation that's been in the media over the last couple of weeks. What I would like to do in the course of my talk with you this afternoon is to try and make sure that we stick to facts and that we shed some light on exactly what is going on in the tax system right now and exactly what is going to affect the PNA and its members in the year ahead, or indeed for the remainder of this year. So we'd separate fact from fiction, because over the number of months, I suppose, leading up to any given budget, you can see that there's a series of different things that happen. We've lots of speculation, pre-budget speculation in the media, in the newspapers. We've lots of talk about what might or might not happen. We have then the spending estimates are published, and then we have another series of speculation about what might or might not happen. And then we have the actual budget statement itself. And over the last few years, budget statements have tended to be light on detail. There's a lot of subtext to them, as you will have gathered yourself from the statement that the Minister delivered recently. We then usually have a lot of post-budget speculation and analysis. Again, a lot of that is just, I suppose, superficial. It doesn't have a lot of detail around it, because really the only two areas that we actually have fact about are the ministerial orders that we get on the night of the budget. They're absolute fact, they're gospel, okay? And they're signed into law once they're passed by Dáil Éireann on the night of the budget itself. And the Finance Act then, once it's passed by the Oireachtas and comes into law by assent of the President of Ireland, Mrs. McAleese, they're the only two facts, and yet we've huge amounts of speculation around it. I gave a presentation to my colleagues the morning after the budget, and one of the things that I was struck by was the number of people who said to me, didn't the Minister do this? Didn't the Minister do that? You're familiar with that yourselves. I'm sure you've had that experience. And even in the weeks and months after budget, people speculate about what he actually said and what actually is now the law. So we're going to dispel some of those myths. Okay. Could I ask you maybe for a hands up? How many people in the room feel that you overpay your tax? Maybe quick hands up. Well, you'd be about right, actually. I would have said that's probably in around 75–80% of the people in the room. You're actually right, every one of you. Because every year, over 3/4 of us overpay our income tax liability. Now, there's obviously no reason for it, but we go and we do it year in, year out. And in last year alone, 2007, €1.5 billion of our hard-earned money was held onto by the Minister for Finance. And the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that again. So it's a huge sum of money that we're talking about. So does tax matter? I think it does. Why? Why all the overpayments? Why so much money? As Manuel might say to Basil Fawlty, Ke, what's going on? Is it because the tax system is a foreign language? Well, I think it is a foreign language to some of us. Or I think at least we think it's a foreign language. It's not. Generally speaking, the reason why people overpay is lack of knowledge of the system, lack of knowledge of how it operates, and maybe about the main tax reliefs and credits. We all have to pay our tax liabilities. Make no mistake about that. Our state, our system, our society won't function without that. But none of us are under any obligation to overpay. We have to get the balance right. Now, I'm not talking about the rights and wrongs of what taxes are levied on whom. I'm just simply making the point that as it stands right now, our tax system causes us to overpay. And we've got to look at that. And we, indeed, as professionals in the area, representing, giving people the voice, we need to make sure that they get their money back. It's hard earned. 7 out of 10 of you, 7 out of 10 of your members, 7 out of 10 of every POE taxpayer in the country overpays every year. So ask yourself the question, is that you? Are you overpaying? I'll have a very quick look at the main allowances and reliefs for the current year. Okay, a lot of them are pretty well self-evident, but again, we often fall into a trap in Ireland of, I suppose, making assumptions. Sure, that doesn't apply to me. Sure, there's no way that I could be entitled to anything extra. Sure, the taxman gives me my tax credit cert at the start of every year, and sure, that's the end of it. What else could I be entitled to? If we fall into that trap, and if we make that assumption, we are absolutely guaranteed to overpay our tax every single year, without question, without fail. Would you be happy to overpay your tax by €1,000 a year? Because that's what we're doing. 75% of the people in this room, 75% of your colleagues, that's what we're doing. We need to look at things like, basic things like personal circumstances. Are we actually communicating with the tax office and letting them know when, whether and if there's been a change, for example, in our marital status? All too often what happens is we can find ourselves in a situation whereby there may have been a change in our marital status through maybe a marriage breakdown, maybe a bereavement. And obviously there's enough going on in our lives generally around times like that that we don't necessarily need or want to engage with the tax office. We feel that we don't need to do it. And we may let a year slip or a couple of years slip. And before we know it, 3 or 4 years have gone by and we haven't told the tax office of our change in circumstance. And as a result, there may be entitlements that we are due that we've missed out on. So what should you do? You should make sure at all stages that you're in communication with the tax office. It doesn't have to be a big ordeal. Does everybody know what colour envelope, by the way, your tax credit cert comes in? Any idea? What colour envelope is it in? White. Brown, white. White. Well, fair play. It is white. It used to be brown, but the government doesn't like sending out brown envelopes with black harps on it anymore. The government kind of feared, believe it or believe it not, they actually did a study on this and they discovered that most people, when they receive an envelope with a black harp on it, they just don't open it. And it sits under the microwave or in the press or in the glove box of the car. I see a few people smiling there. That's obviously where you have yours. The thing about it is, though, without checking these documents, without engaging with the tax system, of course we're going to overpay. That's the very first document. Every single year, each and every one of us, we should spend 15 minutes, take it out of the envelope and have a look at it. And before Pat Kenny goes off the air now, this Friday night, okay, well maybe not this Friday night, might be the best Friday to do it perhaps, maybe next Friday. Turn them off for 15 minutes and have a look at your tax credit cert. It might be more profitable. You'll certainly enjoy the result of it more, that's for sure. But if there's been a change in your circumstances, again, don't make the assumption that, look, things like